We talked about the accomplishments, but you also have to be looking at the time span at which these two players have competed. And Nils, I mean, this goes back.
Exactly, several years of experience, and it wasn't just playing Pokemon, it was getting records as well. Top 4 worlds in 2018, in the previous year, top 8, so not only showing consistency, but showing growth and progression. Most recently as well in 2020, being able to be a regional champion in Richmond, and most recently at Stuttgart, a finalist. When you come runner-up, it just makes you more hungry to get that #1 spot.
Yeah, it's so close, you can taste it.
Yeah.
But still, one more step. Whereas on Tim Ed's, the top 32, I mean, these tournaments are getting bigger and better. That is fantastic. But making it to the grand finals here, you heard him before. He does not want to waste this opportunity. And with this really, really solid team, it makes sense on why he's made it to this point. And I love the contrast that we have between these two finalists in that way.
Yes, a lot of balance on Tim's side, that very classic fire, water core. And one of the key things is this Raging Bolt. Now, it's a Pokemon we saw yesterday. I don't think we're going to see it in this final, however, Sierra. It doesn't give a lot of momentum against Pokemon like the Porygon 2 and the Ursaluna. So it's going to be, I think, a little bit more reliant on Tim to bring that damage through with a Pokemon like the Ogerpon or even something like the Rillaboom.
It's tough when you're going up against a team like Nils because, hey, Nils even admitted, yeah, this team that you're playing, Tim, like there's a lot of it out there. But of course, he's experienced against this. I'm sure that he's seen these Raging Bolts everywhere. And when you have something like this Ursaluna that, of course, is going to be completely immune to a Thunderclap, and you can find yourself in a Trick Room with it. There's a lot of things that don't really match up well to a Headlong Rush or an Earthquake. Even the Facade, just hitting that normal neutral damage, is incredible when you have that ability Guts to be boosting those attacks. And the Porygon 2, I mean, hey, it's been around a VGC for a long time for a reason. Set the Trick Room, but it can be picking away at Pokemon as well with damage.
And that's the thing I like about it, that flying Terra type on it not only gives it the immunity if the Ursaluna next to it wants to start going for all these Earthquakes, but being able to go for a flying Terra type gives you so much coverage into Tim's team. Pokemon like the Rillaboom, the Ogerpon, even the Urshifu, if it hasn't gone for a Terrestrialization, is not going to want to take any of these flying type attacks.
That also means, too, if you have the Ursaluna and the Porygon 2 sitting on the field, you can go for the flying-type Terrestrialization and not be hit by your own Earthquakes. Love this quote. The old Nils is back.
Exactly. This was the most recent runner-up position that Nils got in Stuttgart, and he says he's back, and by that, he means his consistency, his results. He's back in the format. Watch out for his name, because he's going to be coming for you on those top tables, and he has shown that he's going to do that here at EUIC.
Hey, if there is any doubters there after that statement, I'm sure there isn't at this point anymore. Especially, too, since we did get to see his run throughout to get to this point. And if you wanted to see some fantastic matches, well, you have to go check these out. Because Nils, I mean, he's definitely been proving it in more ways than one.
Nils has such a unique play style as well. Sometimes can throw a wild card play out there, but he's always so in control of what he wants to do within a match. Here you can see as well the Flutter Mane behind the substitute just being taken down by the Spore, but it still doesn't stop Nils. He has such good utility to be able to bring it back in this match.
Thing is, there's a couple of different ways that can be pressured, but there is ways that your own team can be kind of taken down. Grass Translation on this Incineroar, I think is really interesting because, of course, it means that you will take less from the Earthquake, but also primarily you will not get spored, but also something that players can be taking advantage of.
And you can see how much damage those facades do, particularly if it is burnt and enabling its Guts ability. There's really nothing that the opposing team can do, unless, of course, you're something like a Flutter Mane and immune.
Ursaluna, though, is the one thing that you're really going to be looking at in this matchup, and I'm sure there's the key piece of the team throughout the entirety of Nils' run there. The Headlong Rushes, sure, you're going to be taking that defense and special defense boost, but if you're just taking consistent one-hit KOs with it, it is incredible. And all of a sudden, oh, well, this Pokemon's resisting that, or I just don't want to have that happen to me, all these drops. You have the Facade as well. Going to be so boosted with the fact that you are going to be burning yourself thanks to the Flame Orb.
Ursaluna has all the options. It has that coverage as well with the Earthquake, and that's something that Tim is going to be very cognizant of, maybe wanting to try and bring the Rillaboom and bring that grassy terrain onto the field to try and kind of negate some of that damage. But if Ursaluna is able to get onto the field unchecked, then that is going to be such an uphill climb for Tim. You can take a deeper dive at his team here, and for me, the two key components are the Flutter Mane and the Ogerpon. Flutter Mane, we did see yesterday that booster energy boosting up its speed, and that enables Tim to gain an advantage on Nils' team, being able to apply pressure with the Taunt to try and shut down the opposing Porygon 2, or even the Incineroar from going from these parting shots and pivoting out of the field, while at the same time, maybe applying pressure to something like the opposing Urshifu that's running that Choice Scarf. If your booster is a Flutter Mane, that makes you very speedy.
Yeah, and it'll all come down to in these faster moments where these Pokemon are trained. And we've seen these key pieces on Tim's team here being something like the Raging Bolt and a lot of core things to kind of enable that. But of course, it isn't all about that, even though if that is how yesterday's match went. Looking at the other Pokemon, you do have a lot of ways to be putting a lot of pressure on, and that's what I'm looking for in this match. Pressure, whether it's shutting the Porygon 2 down with something like the taunt so it can't Trick Room, to then try and get big damage, you need to make sure you're capitalizing on those turns while you can. Making waves in the first year competing, I'd say that's about right.
Oh, definitely. It definitely has established him as a key name to keep an eye on in the future. And for the first year, not only being able to make it through to the grand finals, but being one set away from possibly being the champion really does establish him in the history books of VGC.
And even when you see a name make it this way, you might be, oh, are they really making a wave? But hey, his top 4 match was up against NAIC champion last year in Alex Gomez. And this was a really, really good match. This was the Raging Bolt mirror and really just step in step with Alex throughout the entire thing. And this match was an absolute grind. This is another one where you did have a little bit of an advantage with just the difference in how your Raging Bolts were kind of set up. Tim, of course, having the leftovers, but still, if you make one too many wrong moves, well, that's gonna spell disaster.
Exactly, you can see the narrative coming through of this kind of David and Goliath storyline between Tim and Nils, but Tim versus Alex was exactly the same precedent, and Tim was able to fell the NAIC champion, a titan of competitive play in the form of Alex, showing that he has the caliber and the composure to be able to do so. The issue is going to be that room for error. In this match against Alex, there were a few opportunities where you could maybe make a mistake and not be too heavily punished for it, and Alex made a couple of those as well. In this final, however, Tim literally has no room for error. Nils can capitalize on it. He can punish those defensive plays and errors and then start sweeping through the match with that Ursaluna.
And a big thing of Tim's team as well is the double pivot that you have with the Intimidate on the Incineroar and the Rillaboom coming out and Fake Out on both of these Pokemon. And there was a lot of pivoting and a lot of really good calls being made here, but again, you have to get it right. If you're all of a sudden pivoting and Nils is gonna take the opportunity, hey, you're not attacking with one of these Pokemon, we're going for it, and there we go. And as we said earlier, this is the rematch, and this is one that Nils won, but it was actually a very, very commanding position as well. This wasn't a close match, and that has to be lingering in Tim's mind as well.
And I think Nils said it there on the stage, the 6 Pokemon that Tim have brought was something that he was expecting to see. So he will have had a very clear game plan going into that match. Not only does he already have a strategy, but he's already faced this trainer, and a lot of Pokemon isn't just playing the Pokemon, it's playing the player. So he has a bit of insight into the way that Tim operates with this team. However, in a rematch situation, so many different things can be learned. Tim will no doubt have studied this, looked and reflected on the mistakes that he made and the opportunities he could create. So I think if you're Nils, you cannot expect it to be the same match you played earlier.
But that's where that experience comes in. You know it's not gonna be the same match, but you can swap it up, and it's time to head into the grand finals here at EUIC. Incineroar, Fluttermane for Tim, and over on the opposing end, Porygon 2, Incineroar, let's get it started.
Yes, Incineroar, the king of VGC, out on the field. Perfect positioning for Nils here to try and maybe enable to get that Trick Room up, but Tim reading into it perfectly, bringing that taunting Fluttermane onto the field to try and ruin Porygon 2's day.
And what I love about the Fluttermane having the taunt, since it is a ghost type, it can't be faked out by the Incineroar. Normally you can see these leads coming out from Nils, so you can make sure that your Porygon 2 isn't too pressured the first time around. So this is gonna be tough. Since the Porygon 2 is gonna be the ghost type, I mean, you won't be worried about the fake out, it's always gonna be about the taunt here.
Yes, exactly, and that's the pressure that Fluttermane wants to put down on the field. My question now is how these trainers are going to be able to switch things up, because at the minute, it looks a little neutral. The Incineroars want to be able to have that fake-out pressure. They want to be able to go for those parting shots and bring a Pokemon in from the back. But Nils is not going to be able to get the Trick Room up here if that taunt is coming into that slot.
And for Tim, you need to make sure that you're shutting things down and making the most of the momentum that you have with this lead. And the Porygon 2 swapping out, I'm curious what Tim's gonna be doing here. It's gonna be Ursaluna, the chosen one, right away to be making an appearance.
Porygon 2 knowing it cannot thrive on the field there, bringing in the Ursaluna as the fake out goes down into the opposing Incineroar. The taunt does connect down, so Nils manages to get the Ursaluna in for free here as the Incineroar on Tim's side, unable to move. There goes the burn, Guts is activated, now things look a little dicey for Tim.
If you can be bringing the Ursaluna in mid-turn, you don't have to have that turn of Protect to wait for the Flame Orb to activate. So sure, you're taunted, you can't Protect past the next turn, but you now have that burn, you now have the capability to off-putting a lot of pressure here. You don't want to be taking too much damage, But at the same time, if Tim's not taking a KO onto this Ursaluna with something like the Facade and the Incineroar and Headlong Rush into either of these Pokemon, well, it's going to be a clean KO.
That's the thing, Headlong Rush can only target one of these Pokemon, but it's going to be a very easy knockout. You don't want to go for Facade with something like the Flutter Mane on the field, and the Earthquake is going to be able to hurt your partner Incineroar as well. So I think if you're Nils, you just want to start getting those clean and easy knockouts with the Headlong Rush. On Tim's side though, now you've got to play defensively, and again, this is something that Nils can punish. Nils is actually going to take the defensive option, bringing that Incineroar out to intimidate later on, bringing in the bulkier Pokemon like Porygon 2.
And the Porygon 2, now the taunt, it is gone. Download, that will be the attack boost, so not going to be relevant too much for that one. Is Moonblast, the target into the Ursaluna, start chipping away at this Pokemon. Parting Shot, this will be a chance for Tim to pivot and lower the attack of the otherwise super, super mighty bear.
It's definitely one way to start countering this Guts boost, but the issue is if you're that Flutter Mane, you're not very naturally physically defensive. So even if it is taking that little bit of a drop, something like the Headlong Rush is still going to connect in and absolutely wipe this Flutter Mane off the field.
And since you have the boost over on Nils' end, it'll all be about how Pokemon are trained. This is going to be a super hefty Headlong Rush coming out into you, and Tim definitely taking the time, staying calm, looking at what's going to be best to pivot into this. Since the Porygon 2 is in, you want to make sure that you have some way of making sure this Trick Room isn't set up, so Rillaboom will hit the field. This will be the Grassy Surge as well for the grassy terrain.
Yes, this also negates a potential Earthquake that Nils could have gone for here, but instead it's that Headlong Rush straight into the Flutter Mane. That is a one-hit KO. It is gone from the field. Really like the positioning here by Tim, bringing in the Rillaboom to ensure, hey, if you want to maybe go for the Trick Room, you're going to have a bit of trouble with that. But to be honest, I want to try and stop that Ursaluna in its tracks. Tim is really stuck here on which Pokemon to target down with this potential Fake Out.
There is the possibility for the Porygon 2 here to actually, this one's the Flying type Terrestrialization, no Ghost type, so you can hit into it to stop it with a Fake Out. That does mean you would be taking attack from the Ursaluna, and the Ursaluna, it'll either have to attack or go for a swap out on this turn, since it was taunted and doesn't have the option to protect. But Tim can also take advantage of that as well, and going for a powerful hit into it.
I mean, you mentioned the Terrestrialization. There is the Ghost Terra type on the Ursaluna, so that's one way for it to work around maybe taking that potential Fake Out and still being able to get a clean KO, particularly considering when the Incineroar's just joined the field. A Headlong Rush into that space is going to do a lot of damage. Normally, Ursaluna, if it gets the Guts boost up and has taken one Intimidate, it can still be in range to get a KO. Now that it's maybe taken this one here, it's going to be an interesting turn.
It is slowly getting whittled and whittled down the amount of offensive output it'll be able to be putting out here. You can potentially just go for the swap, try and get a Trick Room up, and then bring it back in later. But when you're staring down this Rillaboom and Incineroar, Fake Out options on both, well, the Porygon 2 doesn't feel necessarily too safe either. It is a really bulky Pokemon, but you also have to respect the fact that, hey, there is just the Fake Out option here.
And it looks like Tim is using that Incineroar to try and kind of target down the Ursaluna. The Parting Shot previously, the Intimidate now, just trying to stop these Headlong Rushes from doing a lot of damage. But you also have the option to go for something like the Facade. Just try and get some damage in there without having to take the drops.
Porygon 2 not safe, so Amoonguss is going to be hitting the field in its stead as the double pivot swapping out. If you don't think this one's going to be taking you too far, sure, it might feel a little bad to take that pause, take that moment, but Intimidate here will at least negate the damage coming out over on Tim's end and have these Pokemon eat the Fake Out instead. Fake Out into the Amoonguss, and it'll be a little bit of Rocky Helmet recoil in return.
I honestly love this play by Nils, keeping the dynamic duo in the back of the Ursaluna and the Porygon 2 and bringing these two pivoting Pokemon onto the field does enable him to shake up that ball position as well as enabling Ursaluna to come in a little bit safer later on. It also means that those Intimidates, the Parting Shots, are null and void coming out from Tim. And you can see exactly what he's trying to do, target down that slot and apply a lot of pressure to the Ursaluna. This is one of the Pokemon that can deal a lot of damage. You can go for something like the Ivy Cudgel into that Amoonguss and try and remove it from the field. Amoonguss is in an issue where it cannot go for something like a Spore. There are two grass types on the field here, but it does have utility to go for that Sludge Bomb.
Yes, when they're looking at Nils as well, he does have the Fake Out on this turn, having just swapped into the Incineroar. So Tim, if you're looking to off-put some damage, you have to wonder where this Fake Out's going to be coming from. Since it is not going to be too pressured by the Amoonguss here, it would just be a little bit of damage, but you want to make sure you can maximize these turns while you can.
Exactly, and you can see our players taking every second here to find out where they want to pivot the Pokemon. And if you're Nils, when are you going to be able to bring that Ursaluna back on the field to get the KOs? You want to try and find a way to get rid of this Ogerpon as well. It has that speed advantage as a very speedy Pokemon, and you don't want it to be able to start getting these potential critical hits coming through either. No surprise to see the Fake Out come through here just to protect that Amoonguss a little bit from taking any of those Ivy Cudgels as Rillaboom goes for the U-turn.
And into the Incineroar, it's not about the damage there, it's about what you could be bringing in instead. You do have the Incineroar then, that could be the swap in, just keep putting on this pressure. You want to make sure things that are going to thrive in this Trick Room situation are taken down. So you want to make sure this Amoonguss cannot be doing much on this turn. A round of Intimidate as well. The Incineroar, that attack's going to be doing less. Sludge Bomb into the Incineroar, just a little bit of damage.
And I think the fact that Tim only has 3 Pokemon remaining right now does give him such limited flexibility in which Pokemon obviously he can pivot in. So this Incineroar keeps returning to the field, but not being able to do what it wants. There's no Ursaluna to intimidate. There's no opportunity to really go for a fake out that's going to be detrimental.
But there is now the fake out that you can be using into the Amoonguss if you want to be trying to target into with the Orgrimmon. Or if you think you are seeing a Protect come out, try and hit something into another slot. With each passing turn, Nils, I mean, you're still looking for that opportune moment. And you don't have to play this fast as long as you're not necessarily taking too much damage on your Pokemon. When you have the Hearthflame Orgrimmon on the opposing side staring you down, though, you know that that damage is inevitable.
I think this is where Tim has to start taking some risks here. And the issue with Tim's play here is it's high risk, but not a lot of reward. You've just got to get it right. If you want to go for something on your Incineroar, like the knockoff, trying to maybe predict if the Porygon 2 is going to come in and remove that Eviolite, make it a little bit more vulnerable, that could give him a little bit more of an edge in this match. Porygon 2 is joining the field, but what has Tim decided to do here?
You're looking for an opportunity to bring this Porygon 2 in. Amoonguss on the Protect. If Tim thought that the Amoonguss was protecting it doubled into the other slot, could be huge. But the Ivy Cudgel, no. Hitting into the Amoonguss. So much respect for the little mushroom, but it means nothing from that Pokemon this turn. Parting Shot from the Porygon 2 will drop it, but you will now at least be able to bring the Rillaboom back in, so you do still have Fake Out on this next turn to keep that Porygon 2 in check.
I think that's what Tim needs to do. Just keep bringing in Rillaboom, Incineroar, and just keep that fake up pressure on the field. Because when you actually look at the Pokemon, such as, you know, the Amoonguss and the Porygon 2, they're not dealing a massive offensive pressure. You can kind of safely bring these 2 pivoting Pokemon in just so that they're primed and ready for you to hopefully catch one of the heavy hitters in the back.
When you're looking at something like the Porygon 2 on the field as well, it does not protect. So hitting into that Pokemon is always going to be safe. And you have to make a decision now if you're Nils, because the Amoonguss having just protected on that previous turn, if you try and go for the Protect once again, it's only a 1 in 3 chance. If you pivot out there, the Porygon 2 is such a safe hit into that spot. And you know that Tim has to respect the fact that that Trick Room can be going up and has to stop it.
Yes, and something like the Incineroar could easily just come in for that Amoonguss. The Intimidate comes down. You're not going to worry about an Ivy Cudgel. You're not going to worry about something coming through from the Rillaboom. But on that Ogerpon on Tim's side, it is running that Stomping Tantrum. So again, if Tim can get into Nils' head and figure out what play he's getting and call it correctly, that could just give him an edge. The damage has to stop going down on the board at some point.
I think it's a big game of where does the Incineroar come in if you're Tim here. And with the Porygon 2 swapping out, we're going to see that Incineroar, the Rampaging, rejoin the field. Intimidate will bring down the attack on both of these Pokemon, so wherever they're targeting, if it is into that Amoonguss or not, is going to be doing a little less. But it's time to see the first terrestrialization of our match.
Let's light up the stage here in the Masters Grand Final as the terrestrialization comes through on the Ogerpon. It's now going to get that Embody aspect and get the attack boosted back up that it just had dropped by that Intimidate.
Make sure you can deal as much damage as you can. Make sure that that Intimidate just gets evened out with that attack rise. But it's not going to be the only terrestrialization. It'll be Amoonguss as well, dropping its grass typing into the ghost type, so anything headed its way is just going to be a neutral hit.
Yes, this also means that Amoonguss is safe from any of these potential fake outs that have been rolling around through this game. So just allowing it a bit of defensive flexibility. The fake out was actually going down into that partner slot here as the Ogerpon does go for the Stomping Tantrum, but goes into this ghost type and it does very little damage. We'll have to take almost the same in recoil here, allowing the Amoonguss to go for the Spore. What a perfect read.
The calls are coming out, but in Nils' favor, calling the terrestrialization, dropping that grass typing, and making sure that you can Spore it and have this Ogerpon stopped in its tracks. Stomping Tantrum into the Amoonguss, a call that the Incineroar, where does it come into here, would have been into that slot. That would have been a super effective hit, but now it basically negated, and that is a huge momentum swing in Nils' favor.
Nils absolutely one step ahead of Tim here, calling it perfectly, knowing the terrestrialization was there and taking full advantage. This is exactly what we were saying in the team preview, and Nils is now in a great position to keep building up this momentum. Amoonguss can always try and go for something like the Sludge Bomb down into the opposing Rillaboom. It does have to worry about maybe something the Rillaboom can throw in its direction. It could always just try and U-turn out of there or go for the Wood Hammer and boost it up by that grassy terrain, but that's why the Incineroar right next to that Amoonguss is the perfect partner in crime.
I would look to see the Rillaboom either go on the offensive, try and start dealing with the Amoonguss, since at this point the Amoonguss will just take a neutral hit from something like a Woodhammer, or pivot back out if you're thinking that Nils is going to try and find an opportune moment for that Porygon 2 to come into place. First turn to sleep onto the Ogerpon, that one's a guaranteed, as Parting Shot will bring this back down to -1, so it can't be doing that big damage that Tim would like once it wakes up.
Ogerpon's not having a good time on the field right now. You know, it's taking a little bit of a nap, needs to wake up for these finals, as well as having all these stats dropped. If you're Tim, it's very risky as well to try and bring in a Pokemon from the back, because you don't want it to have to take a spore either. That Incineroar is going to be a prime target to that Amoonguss, and particularly as it has now dropped its weakness, it's a very formidable threat. This U-turn doing nothing, and I think it's really kind of demonstrating on Nils' side the bulk and the brawn that he's got on his team.
And with the Porygon 2 coming on in, and the Incineroar hitting the field, this one is that Citrus Berry variety. So a Spore, if it is targeted into the slot, will be 2 sleeping Pokemon over on Tim's end. The Intimidate, not going to be impactful here. It's all eyes on this Amoonguss. Instead, attack into the Ogerpon. Huge opportunity, but still, you don't have to risk it if you think you're that far ahead.
I mean, we've spoken a lot about Ursaluna being the issue on this team, but actually it has become this Amoonguss. The Incineroar, the Cloud Watcher, has joined the field, but it needs to watch its step. If it doesn't want to take a Spore from this opposing Amoonguss, you cannot go for the Fake Out into it now that it has turned into a Ghost type as well, making it so difficult to disrupt.
And the Porygon 2, we see the lock-in, feeling safe that this is the primed pose position to try and go for that Trick Room. And from there, if Nils can get the Trick Room set up relatively free, it'll be great. Since there is still the Fake Out option into the Porygon 2, you can go for that there, but then you can't get punished by the Spore in return. So it is really, well, you gain a little, you lose a lot situation.
And even if you go for the Fake Out, as Tim has done here with a little cheeky critical hit, it doesn't stop the Porygon 2 for going for that Trick Room on the next turn. Ogerpon is asleep. It's not going to be doing too much damage, even if it wakes up anyway, thanks to all the previous Intimidates. And once again, the Amoonguss just capitalizing on the opportunities it's got to get damage down on the board. This is really when Nils can start getting that Trick Room up. You could bring in a Pokemon like the Ursaluna from the back, or if you want to keep it really safe to bring it in more securely, bring in that Incineroar, throw the Intimidate down, and insult that Ogerpon further.
Slowly but surely chirping away at that Ogerpon. It has at risk at waking up any moment now, and Intimidate will drop that attack even further. Of course, there is always the heightened critical risk chance with the Ivy Cudgels, and the Wake Up, it will be firing one off. If it was into the Amoonguss, though, that is the freshly swapped in Incineroar, but no, Porygon 2, no critical hit means absolutely no damage coming on out.
Ogerpon needs to dig a little deeper to get those critical hits in play. The Citrus Berry has been removed from the Incineroar, but it's still in a great position. No Trick Room coming through. Actually, the Terra Blast that coming through, getting the KO. Ogerpon is down and out. Tim only has 2 Pokemon remaining, and Nils looks firmly in the driving seat.
And this is the thing about Nils teams and having options. You can go for the Trick Room and feel pretty good about it, and you have that Ursaluna in the back, but at the same time, when the Ogerpon's already so low because of that damage that you've been slowly chipping up, you just get rid of that Pokemon, you bring Tim down to 2. There's no longer going to be a pivoting game, and you can't have that Fake Out still hitting the field. Rillaboom will have 1 on this turn, but now these 2 Pokemon are stuck out on the field.
And I don't think it's coincidence that the Fluttermane and the Ogerpon have been the first Pokemon KO'd on Tim's side. Those were the 2 that would give Nils the most disruption. Now he's safe to go for these Flare Blitz. Look at that, another KO. Incineroar jumping on the offensive. And now there's just the Incineroar versus all 4 Pokemon on Nils' side.
As soon as the heat was turned on, it was cranked up in this match. Knock off into the Porygon 2. Oh no, the Eviolite is gone, but at this point in the match, the Trick Room is set. If it wasn't sealed before, well, that makes it now.
Porygon 2 just showing that it can still actually go for the Trick Room. It is capable of doing it. Wasn't able to get it up. Exactly. You know, it's done lots of good things on the field, but this is where it really is in its comfort zone. If I was Tim now, I'd start looking towards game 2. I do like the Pokemon options that he brought. It gave him flexibility. It gave him options, but Nils has those by the bucket load. The issue that Tim has got is he has to find a way to capitalize on those moments, trying to catch the Ursaluna instead of allowing it to come in that turn 1, whereas Nils is able to have more flexibility in those. If he doesn't make 1 or 2 reads, it's not going to be super detrimental to his ball position. But if he's able to catch one, the momentum just swings completely in his favor.
I think where it was tricky is we saw Tim go ahead and make some of these plays, making these calls. Specifically, the one that stands out to me is when Incineroar could have come in for either slot and targeting the Stomping Tantrum into the onslaught with the treads of the Amoonguss, and it wasn't swapped in there, and all of a sudden you're doing no damage. So Tim showing that, yes, he will make this plays, but Nils just kind of one step ahead. That was the same turn where we got to see the Spore fired off, and when you're losing the damage capability over on Tim's end, well then you are just losing so much in this match. And it even just started on that first turn. The Flutter Mains start coming out from him. Great way to shut down the Porygon too, but all of a sudden we saw the swap. Ursaluna comes in and still just so much damage, and the Flutter Mane couldn't stand up.
But this is what I mean by the flexibility of Nils, because going for that Spore, even if it didn't terrestrialize, it wasn't going to lose you the match in that turn. You still had a couple of options, and there wasn't that much capability, minus maybe a critical hit, for Tim to be able to capitalize on it. I think coming into this next match, Tim has the potential to do something with the Urshifu. Urshifu is a very interesting set in here where it's running the Focus Sash. And in a format where we see a lot of Choice Scarf or even Mystic Water, having that little bit of respite, having that one kind of second chance you can get from taking damage could be what he needs to be able to get a KO. Something like the Surging Strikes is going to be able to connect down and do big damage into opposing Pokemon like the Ursaluna, into the Incineroar. You've just got to make sure you avoid the Porygon 2 and the Amoonguss, and that's easier said than done, Sierra.
It definitely is, especially when looking at the Amoonguss, since it is Rocky Helmet Amoonguss over on Nils' end. One wrong turn and that Amoonguss is swapped in, or one wrong call, and all of a sudden you're going to be taking so much damage that Focus Sash won't matter. Your health is going to be absolutely depleted, and it's going to be really, really tough time from there. It is nice, since you will have the consistent critical hits with the Surging Strikes, that you won't have the same pivoting coming out from Nils, the Parting Tox, the Incineroar to lower it, but it's still so risky.
I think Tim has to take a couple of these risks, though. Nils is one game away from becoming the European International Champion. Tim has to be able to dig deep not once, but twice in order to take the title. Nils, I think, looking very calm, leading out with a Flutter Mane of his own and the Incineroar against, oh, look at that, Sierra. Incineroar and Flutter Mane on Tim's side.
Great minds think alike. Heading in to our Grand Finals, our second match here. Booster Energy, Photosynthesis activated on Tim's end. This will be the speed, making sure this Flutter Mane is going to be the speediest thing around. But over on the other end, just kidding, we got another one coming out, but this one will be Special Attack.
This is the thing, the speed on Tim's side, very, very nice to be able to go for something like that Icy Wind, get a little bit of chip, drop it further, or even just fire off a powerful Moonblast into that opposing Flutter Mane. The issue is Nils' one is going to be able to hit back even harder thanks to that special attack boost.
When you're looking at it though, since you are going to be outsped, you do not want to be having a powerful hit targeted into you with something like the Shadow Ball coming out from Tim. So you have to be putting a little bit respect from this. Since we actually don't have that move over on Tim's end, we could just see something to kind of slow the speed, but that means that you have a way, you don't have that powerful way to pressure. Though a Terra Fairy Moonblast would still deal loads.
It would, and the Shadow Ball on Nils' side, actually, that is something you don't want to have to worry about, because it could go down and get a big amount of damage, but instead, Flutter Mane actually choosing to protect, maybe see what Nils is going to go for here. It is that Shadow Ball, a wise defensive play on Tim's side of the field, and of course, no fake out to be seen from these Incineroars. One knockoffing into the other, so now the Incineroar is going to lose his Citrus Berry, does not have that in his back pocket for later on, as the Incineroar on Tim's side utilizes the opportunity to try and drop that special attack boost thanks to the Parting Shot.
Yeah, just keeping the Flutter Mane over on Tim's end honest. Hey, I got this, but you don't, and let me see why it could be a detriment going on forward. Since you do have a stage of lowered special attack going on, that is going to be negating that booster energy that you had. So you do have to be able to capitalize on this while you can. Since it is slower, you can still be threatening some pressure into it too.
And that's gone for the match now as well. It's not like the Flutter Mane can switch out and get the booster energy again. It has to now keep itself at this neutral position. Tim really taking his time to think which Pokemon he wants to bring in here. He has to call every turn perfectly, and it is going to be the Ogerpon. Breathing a sigh of relief, there's no Amoonguss in sight. And again, thanks to the speed advantage it's got, it's now in a prime position to deal out damage. You could go for something like the Ivy Cudgel into that opposing Flutter Mane and remove it from the field. And regardless of what Nil has in the back, nothing really wants to switch into an unintimidated Ivy Cudgel. You could even take it further and go for the Terrestrialization.
Interesting to note here, now that we get an opportunity to see what Nils has brought to this match, this is a complete pivot, a complete 180 from what we saw here in game number 1. We have that little bit of information that Tim doesn't. So I'm intrigued to see if he thinks going on forward, if there is that trick remote in the back. This will be that first hint, though, with the Incineroar swapping out, that maybe this match isn't quite what it seems as Amoonguss joins the field.
This is so typical of Nils' playstyle as well. You think you've got his matchup down, and he actually shakes things about completely, throws you completely off your game. We are going to see the Terrestrialization come out, and it is going to be on that Ogerpon Half Flame, getting the Embody Aspect boost and getting +1 attack. Thanks to the speed, momentum that Tim has got early on in this game too, this is where things could really hurt. Amoonguss or Fluttermane does not want to take an Ivy Cudgel.
Whether you make the call or whether you made the safe play, because Protect on the Fluttermane coming out from Nils means you don't want to be taking any of that damage this time around. Moonblast would be firing into the freshly swapped into the Amoonguss. Very little damage there. Stomping Tantrum, anticipating the Incineroar was sticking in. You're still going to be doing a nice chunk of damage on this turn, but it's not going to be a clean one-hit KO into something like that freshly swapped in Mushroom.
You can really see that Tim was targeting down that Incineroar, trying to remove the potential Intimidates from the field, because that's something that the Ogerpon is really not going to appreciate, as well as having that fake out momentum that Nils demonstrated so perfectly in game 1. The issue is now the Incineroar's in the back. Nils can freely bring that in, go for an Intimidate here.
With the Incineroar as well, we fall into that same game as game 1. Where does the Incineroar swap in? Because the Ivy Cudgel targeted into that slot is not going to be doing much. And if you all of a sudden anticipate, hey, I think the Incineroar swapping in here and hit a Stomping Tantrum into a slot, we already got to see that the damage into the Amoonguss, it wasn't too much. Maybe with that double up, it could just hit that kicker, but it would definitely be close. Fluttermane had to protect the last time around, so we'll switch this time.
Yes, doubling down on the safety here for Nils, bringing in the Incineroar to the field once again to get that Intimidate and kind of put the Ogerpon back in check a little bit as this game is progressing out. Fluttermane also going defensive on Tim's side, not wanting to have to take any potential Shadow Ball coming through from Nils' Fluttermane. And look at that, Sierra, a little bit of a passive turn from both our players.
A chance to kind of scout out what's going on. Ivy Cudgel attempted into the Amoonguss is just going to be a negated hit. Now, Nils, you have that fake out pressure going onto this turn into the Ogerpon on the other end. Of course, you can just go for the spiky shield and just target into the Amoonguss. Since it had protected, it could be safe, and it is already low enough that could be trying to do something. But again, the move selection and move choice be tough. You have the taunt, though.
That's the thing, Fluttermane's key in this point. It can go for the taunt into the opposing Amoonguss, but Amoonguss on Nils' side does have access to that Sludge Bomb, and that's not something that the opposing Fluttermane wants to take. Fluttermane is key for Tim here. We know that the Urshifu is hiding in the back for Nils. It's Choice Scarf. You need to make sure that your booster energy boosted Fluttermane is still on the field to be able to try and outpace it.
Especially, too, when you know that Nils is piloting a little bit more offensive team and that he was able to pick away the options in that first game. You can't fall down that same rabbit hole again. Amoonguss, instead of taking any weird 50-50s, any chance, take the opportunity to swap out now. And if it is a taunt into the swap, then it would be a wasted turn. Taunt, though, into the Incineroar instead, making sure that we can't see something like a parting shot coming out.
Honestly, love to see that as a way to shut down that Incineroar. Ogerpon now going for the Ivy Cudgel, going to be going down into this opposing Urshifu, not doing too much damage, however, but just getting a little bit on the board. Incineroar now going for the Flare Blitz. Again, not getting these KOs, but damage is being dealt from both our trainers. They're starting to switch up onto the offensive.
And with the Fluttermane being such a huge threat, going on the offensive with that Flare Blitz instead is a really, really good call. Not only do you cover for that potential taunt, but you make sure you can do the damage into this turn. And now that Urshifu hitting the field over on Nils' end of the field, it is the Choice Scarf. So when we're looking at the speed, it's probably going to be the fastest thing here, which makes it so dangerous when you're staring down these Pokemon. These Surging Strikes are absolutely no joke.
The Ogerpon on Tim's side as well is very much invested into being an offensive threat. We don't see any Follow Me on there, and it has got the utility to go for something like a Spiky Shield, but in the face of something like an Urshifu, that's going to be null and void thanks to the Unseen Fist ability. That is one speedy Pokemon for sure. This is where you have to make these split-second decisions of what you lock into. Looks like Nils is really trying to target down into that opposing Fluttermane, worrying that the speed boost might be too much for the Urshifu, keeps it safe in the back.
Weren't kidding about the split-second decision. I was getting a little worried here at this point. Amoonguss coming back out onto the field. Icy Wind is going to be lowering both of the speeds of these Pokemon. Nice little chunk of damage onto the Amoonguss, all things considered. You want to keep chipping down at that now even more since it does have added, since it did get the Regenerator. Now, you will be able to fire off an attack with this Ogerpon Wood Hammer. Again, great swap coming out from Nils to make sure there's never an opportunity for Tim to get ahead.
This Amoonguss really is the thorn in Tim's side. In game 1, it was so disruptive, and now it's just being completely annoying on the field. Fluttermane does go down, however, Nils has perfectly pivoted in a situation where his Urshifu in the back is safe and sound. Once that comes back onto the field, it's going to be so difficult for Tim to maneuver. You already have dropped your grass typing on that Ogerpon. A Surging Strikes is going to be able to get the knockout. The Incineroar, again, not going to be able to appreciate that. But I wonder what Tim's last Pokemon is going to be.
It's so tough, though. The Fluttermane's queen for a reason. With the Kingdom falling, you can see potentially a chance for things to be falling apart because you needed the speed on your end. You needed the capability to Icy Winds and to shut down Nils' team. And when the things like the Urshifu is preserved, we won't even have to play the speed game going down on the line. So even when that Pokemon re-hits the field, is a possibility for it to wreak havoc. You still have something still potential that Urshifu. Instead, it's going to be hitting the field. This can't be dealing damage, but it doesn't still have the same speed that Nils does.
That's the thing, the Urshifu does have the Focus Sash, so you do have a tiny bit of respite from maybe taking one super effective attack or just any damage at this point. You can always apply pressure with something like that Surging Strikes into the opposing Incineroar. I just wonder if the damage that the opposing Urshifu had taken on Nils' side is going to be enough to maybe allow the opposing Urshifu to try and get the KO. Nils going to switch things up in the ball position, wants to keep that Intimidate for the Urshifu and the Ogerpon a little bit later on, and brings that Fluttermane back into the field, which I really think isn't a key piece in this match right now.
Gonna be keeping the Incineroar safe, Fluttermane coming back out. There was a close combat into that. It won't do anything. An Ivy Cudgel into the protecting Amoonguss. You don't see Protect too often in front of the Urshifu, but making sure you can survive past that turn, crucial. And the call, again, no momentum from Tim's end, stopped straight in his tracks.
Nils is making moves and counter moves and calling them perfectly, bringing that Fluttermane in. It can now apply some pressure with something like a Moonblast or even going for a Shadow Ball just to get some damage on the board. I think you don't want to go for something like the Substitute or Protect here. You just want to make sure you're trying to get some damage and getting that momentum, because as soon as you get rid of the Sash on the opposing Urshifu, then your own Urshifu can start cleaning up. You just got to knock out a few Pokemon first.
And that's going to be the tough part into this. And Nils has done such a great job at making sure at every step in the way that Tim has not been able to make this move. And Tim, it has to be a huge call going into this next turn, a big KO. And it's with the Urshifu swapping out. I don't know if he'll be able to get it. Bringing Incineroar back into the field, you'll have the Fake Out next time around. But if things are going to be passive, I think Nils is just building up a really significant lead.
And you've got to remember as well, the Incineroar had its berry knocked off earlier on in this game, so it doesn't even have that as a little bit of respite recovery as the damage starts steamrolling from Nils' side. Amoonguss in the back wanting to use his Regenerator ability to get a little bit more health, maybe seeing this game 2 is going to go a bit longer than planned, and the Incineroar rejoins the field with that Intimidate.
Could also mean that with the Incineroar swapping in, you could have anticipated an Ivy Cudgel into it, make sure nothing happens there. Spiky Shield instead, Moonblast into the opposing Incineroar. That will bring it down to just below half health at this point. We do have -1 attack over on the Ogerpon, so you do look better and better by the moment.
The thing is, you can't safely switch that Ogerpon out to try and reset that because you don't want your Urshifu in the back to have its Focus Sash broken unnecessarily. Incineroar looks to be in a little bit of a precarious spot about whether it can take another one of those Moonblasts. I think the chip it got earlier from the knockoff was critical there. It might be able to hang on if one more Moonblast finds its mark.
And that'll be the key thing going into this. And you lose that Incineroar, sure, you get the Urshifu in, but I think that you're just going to be down too many strong Pokemon in this match, where Nils, I mean, his Pokemon just feel like they have not been touched. With the constant Regenerator from the Amoonguss, you're gaining so much momentum, and even more now. Fake Out into this Ogerpon, Moonblast from Fluttermane and Incineroar, holding on this time around.
Just able to hang on and go for a parting shot. That's just going to be able to reduce a little bit of the offensive pressure on Fluttermane's side, but I think you make a great observation, Sierra. The damage is all coming through from Nils' side. Tim is constantly being forced to go for these defensive plays or is being intimidated, and the damage is just not stacking up on Nils' side. You do get the Urshifu in here now, so you have the potential to go for these Surging Strikes, and it is in unintimidated.
It is. You still are at risk of taking a very powerful move from this Fluttermane. So you have the Sash, you can take one hit, but you have to make the most momentum out of this Pokemon while you can. The Surging Strikes will hit well into either Pokemon on the field, but you also have to anticipate if there is a potential Amoonguss swap that could be dangerous as well.
And there is no spread move on the Fluttermane, no Dazzling Gleam, so it has to choose its target. It's gone for the Moonblast. Urshifu taken right down to its Focus Sash as Ogerpon can go for the Ivy Cudgel here. Going to be connecting down into the opposing Fluttermane. Doesn't get the critical hit, takes it down to only 29 HP as the Urshifu follows up for that knockout.
No critical hit, so you can't get the double KO on this turn, and having to prioritize the Fluttermane going down, forced to double up into this slot. Now parting shot, you're not going to lose the Urshifu this time around, but it's going to be -2 attack now for the Ogerpon. And we already saw how crucial that -1 was in that Flutter Mane survival.
The thing is, because the Flutter Mane has been KO'd, the Incineroar can just come right back into the match now, throw another Intimidate down, and be able to have that fake up pressure. And with the very low HP that the Urshifu is in, then you're not going to be able to take that. It does mean that Nils is in control.
And when you're looking at the Urshifu hitting the field and the Incineroar as well, you have the priority in terms of the Urshifu, even just that Aqua Jet, 1 HP, you're more than cleanly picking up that KO, or even the Fake Out coming out. And you can't safely protect past the Fake Out because the Urshifu will just KO you. So you, yes, got a lot of momentum with that Urshifu with that KO, but it really, really hurt that you couldn't get that critical hit onto the Flutter Mane with such great pivoting from Nils to negate the attack.
That would have jumped Tim right back into the game if you were able to get that double KO. The Fake Out choosing to knock out the Urshifu, leaving this Ogerpon in prime position for Nils' choice Scarf Urshifu to go for these Surging Strikes.
And Surging Strikes into the Ogerpon. One hit is all it's going to be taking to take that Pokemon down. And this match, Nils has been in such control the entire time.
The Pokemon are celebrating. The crowd is already applauding. You can see Nils' smile because he knows the Incineroar is the last Pokemon standing to take him to the title.
Go through the formalities, Incineroar hitting the field for that last little bow before it's out of this match. It was well played, but Nils, he never let out. Always was so close to the title and is going to claim it. Nils Dunclop is going to be your European International Champion.